Hey everyone, my name is Clay Carrington. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Blockchain Consortium, and I'm really excited that we're going to be continuing our amazing video podcast series. And today we're interviewing Fred Pye, who's the Chairman and CEO of 3iQ. So back in 2012, 3iQ emerged as an early leader in Canada's innovative digital asset sector, with a very strong vision for the role of cryptocurrencies in the future of financial services. So the chairman and CEO, Fred Pye, he has led this company's incredible development of creative and unique funds to let investors participate in this very cutting edge digital asset class. As the former Senior Vice President and National Sales Manager of Fidelity Investments Canada, he is one of Canada's strongest bridges between traditional finance and the growing universe of cryptocurrencies. So thank you so much. I'm so excited that Fred's going to be joining us today for this really insightful podcast on his early interest in Bitcoin and his plans for growth with 3iQ. So Fred, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Kalea, and congratulations to you and the whole CBC and all the work you're doing. It's very good work for the industry in Canada.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, we're really privileged to be here and continuing to support this incredible sector. Even though it's like kind of crazy times right now, we're definitely very dedicated to making sure people still get that education and awareness. So my first question for you today is, when did you first become aware of Bitcoin, and what exactly about this technology sparked your interest?
Well, one of the first products 3iQ was working on was we were part of Landry Investment Management. We were managing a multi-asset momentum portfolio. And it was fun because all the assets were going up and we just said, well, this is easy, but you know, we were always on the quest for that perfect non-correlated asset class. And I kind of fell down the rabbit hole in 2014 when I discovered Bitcoin. And Bitcoin was going up and down, but it wasn't relating to the markets at all. It had its own aura and its own, pattern of behavior with it. And I said, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And I spent some time understanding the technology behind Bitcoin, and I got very excited. And then when the problem was I couldn't put it in my portfolio because there was no way to take a non-regulated, commodity like Bitcoin and put it into a regulated portfolio. And that's when I went on the 4.5-year and $5 million quest to create the very first global regulated Bitcoin fund in the world. And I'm very happy to have done that.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And I know that you have such an interesting journey on how you kind of like stirred that fund and everything you had to do to get it up and going. So to give our listeners a little bit of backstory, how exactly did your previous ventures in investment products like precious metals help to shape 3iQ's current portfolio?
Well, the very first job I had in the industry, I was working for a company called Guardian Trust Company, a great man by the name of Howard Kelly. And Howard had this vision on wanting to list gold, silver, and platinum certificates on the Montreal Stock Exchange. So at 23 years old, he said, Fred, here's your next job. You're going to list gold, silver, and platinum on the Montreal Stock Exchange. And we went to the Quebec Securities Commission regulators and said, well, we'd like to put our gold, silver, and platinum certificates on the exchange. And they said, are you kidding? They said, gold has non-traditional custodians, it's volatile, it's speculative, and it's used for criminal purposes. How could we possibly list that? Why should people possibly own gold? Anyways, fast forward 40 years later, we won that challenge, and all I said I'm doing at the end of my career is listing digital gold, digital silver, and digital platinum on the Toronto Stock Exchange. So I've done it before. It's not the first time. At Argentum, we challenged the regulators once as well to create the first mutual fund that you could short stocks in it. So I've always been on the leading edge of where people should be putting their investments.
Okay, I have to say that's really fascinating. So the fact that they said it was speculative and they said it was volatile and had non-traditional custodians, that sounds a lot like how they're looking at Bitcoin. And it actually kind of shocks me that they looked at gold in that way, because gold seems to have been this kind of global, it was the global reserve for quite a while. It used to be what we backed our money by. And I know they took us off the gold standard. You know, it took a while to get off the gold standard, and I think it kind of came to its end in the 1970s. But it definitely shocks me that the stock markets would have seen that as a speculative asset when that's how they used to base their fiat currency.
Well, it was. So what happened in the late 70s is, inflation was rampant, and gold went from, the $35 an ounce to well over $1,000 an ounce. And everybody said, whoa. So gold went on this massive hockey stick run and then fell. And then it took 30 years for it to get back to $1,000 after that run. But since then, gold is a staple investment in anybody's portfolio to hedge against things like inflation. And this is really what's given Bitcoin a bit of its legitimacy now. It's like a digital gold. And I think we ran ads on BNN saying that if you like gold, you'll love Bitcoin. So we relate the two together.
Oh, definitely. I definitely can see how Bitcoin would be considered a digital version of gold. But what I like is the fact that it's not fungible. Like, alchemy was invented based on the fact that people were trying to turn, or I think it was lead, into gold. And supposedly they've finally been able to do it. They can actually replicate and reproduce gold now. So it's no longer this kind of like scarce asset, especially if it can be recreated, where Bitcoin has that stable, like, you can never have more than 21 million coins, exactly, the amount of Bitcoins that can ever be in existence, where there's an unknown quantity of gold. You have no idea how much there really is on the planet. And considering it's a space metal, if they ever figure out how to mine in space, again, they could produce even more of it and devalue it even further. So Bitcoin's, I think, actually better than digital gold.
Yeah.
Actual gold.
Well, as a store of wealth, in really what, for those of us who've been in, for a number of halvings of Bitcoin supply, every time it has, it kind of goes up 10x. And when it went from 100 to 1,000 and 1,000 to 10,000, and now it's on its 10,000 on its way, hopefully, to 100,000. But today's growth rate of gold is 4% per year, and today's growth rate of Bitcoin is 4% per year. So if you're looking for the scarcity, both gold and Bitcoin have the same scarcity premiums attached to them. However, we know that in 3 years, the supply of Bitcoin will be cut in half. And therefore, Bitcoin will be twice as scarce as gold and potentially twice as good a store of wealth. So people have to look at that and understand the math behind how it works.
I like that you say that. I generally tend to see on the internet, especially Bitcoin Twitter, when you get economists kind of coming in and they're telling people, it's like, oh, you really don't understand, how economy actually works, or numbers or math work, and they're very confused by Bitcoin. So it's good to have people that are educated about this topic, like yourself, to be able to go in and actually explain to them, no, this is actually why it's a store of value, or why it actually is increasing in the value that it has. So my question for you now is, with this price of Bitcoin hitting these record levels this year, and I know it kind of like hit its peak. I'm going to go for Canadian dollars because I'm in Canada. So it was about 51,000, I think, a little bit above that for price. So it was pretty much a record level, all-time high. Do you think that because of that this is the time for true mainstream adoption, or are we still a little bit far away from that?
We are quite still far away from it. Just to think about it, the Canadian banks have not embraced a Bitcoin for their investment advisors. They're not putting a Bitcoin allocation in all their multi-asset portfolios. You can't buy it in the United States. You can't buy it at Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Merrill Lynch. None of the big, real power centers of wealth allow their people to buy Bitcoin yet. So when they do, you're going to see an explosion in the price of Bitcoin. But what we are seeing is some of the larger sovereign wealth funds in the world, some of the bigger pension funds in the world are contacting us and saying, how did you do this? How did you make your product so solid, so secure? How did you get it regulated? And we really address the concerns that people should have. If you're an institution and you want to buy Bitcoin, you can always go out and make your, get a wallet. But if you lose your codes and your passwords, I mean, the guy leaves the firm who took care of it, you lose all your Bitcoin. So when the Ontario Securities Commission regulators challenged us, they challenged us on a number of places. Number one, they said, well, you can't audit Bitcoin. And we said, well, of course you can. Grant Thornton will tell you they can audit it, and they audit it. So the blockchain is the easiest thing to audit. It's an immutable, ledger. So anyways, we got past the audit. Then they said, well, you can't price it properly. We don't know what the real price of Bitcoin is. So we built and designed our own index with Embus Crypto Compare out of Europe to get the most accurate Bitcoin index possible that reflected all regulated, good, clean trading. That was very important. Number three, they said you can't get a regulated custodian, and we said, well, we could. So we ended up with Sidel Trust here in Canada, and Gemini was who we selected to be our custodians in the United States. And our funds are kept in cold storage. Our Bitcoin's kept in cold storage. Deep cold storage isn't attached to the internet. And is probably one of the few places I'd put $1 billion of Bitcoin today. Then they said, well, it's not in the public interest. And the judge said that even though the public interest regulations of the Ontario Securities Commission, even though their powers are broad, they're not infinite. And we argued that when 110,000 Canadians lost $250 million in crypto assets because of Quadriga and Einstein exchanges going down, we said it's time to step up and regulate this space. So we challenged them on all aspects, and the judge's decision fell with us, and it was accepted. It took us 4.5 years, and we look at it as a 4.5-year due diligence by the regulators. And the beauty about it is we came out with an absolutely perfect product that we believe all Canadians should participate in.
I absolutely love that. So I know I've heard some of your incredible stories when it came to, being in court and getting it pushed through. Would you give us some some indication of what it was actually like in court? What kind of evidence the Securities Commission was trying to bring up against you guys to say, oh no, we shouldn't let this fund proceed forward?
Well, there were a lot of surprising moments. We had the lawyers at Osler represented us very, very well. Our witness, Sean Cumby, did a masterful job as our witness. He was our CIO at the time. But we definitely challenged them. And at one point in time, they said, well, you quoted that 5% of Canadians own Bitcoin. And our lawyer goes, yes, that was the Ontario Securities Commission study that said 5%. That was your study. And she goes, well, you didn't highlight that most of that the largest demographic is males between the ages of 35 and 50. And the judge looked at her and goes, and that demographic segment doesn't deserve the support of a regulated Bitcoin fund. And she said, what's your point? But then she also said, well, if we regulate it, then, all the moms and pops and grandmas and everybody says, I'm pretty sure Canada's brokerage industries have other gatekeepers besides the Ontario Securities Commission, and advisors do have to know your product and they do have to know their clients. So it wasn't going to be this rampant thing, but the real landmark decision had to do with the fact that the judge said it's not up to the OSC to decide whether they like Bitcoin or not. It's up to them to make sure that it is properly constituted within the laws of Canada. It's not up to them to shield Canadians from volatility or speculation, however they want to do it. And I think that that's really the basis for Canadian capital markets. We will take that decision and we'll bring it around the world. We'll challenge other regulators around the world with our Canadian decision. And we hope that the Canadian Bitcoin Fund is going to be listed in many other markets around the world, and a few to be announced shortly, which will be really wonderful.
That's fantastic. So actually, this leads really great into my next question. We've already been having great dialogue on this, but so what are your views on the OSC's decision on 3iQ, and what do you think the regulators could do even better to address this market?
Well, I think on the side of the types of funds that we've done, they've done a great job. As I said, it was 4.5 years. And one other story, and I'd like to mention it here. The reason we filed was because we spoke with the former head of the investment funds branch, which was somebody by the name of John Mountain. And John said, he said, I'm not sure I really understand the Bitcoin thing, but we'd love to be first in the world to list it. So we worked hard with them on the first series of prospectuses. Then they had the launch pad that we had to then regulate ourselves. And then we had to come around one more time, and we were about to launch, and John was about to approve us in June of 2018. And John ended up getting a horrible pancreatic cancer, and he passed away in about a period of 3 weeks. So our filing disappeared in 2018, and then we gave everybody some time to get over the shock of losing a good friend who we all lost. But when we came back, they said, yeah, this isn't going to work. We're going to have to start over. And we just said, no, you can't start over. Give us the reasons why you're rejecting it. And then you have in Canada the right to challenge the regulators. And that's what we did. So the next item is for the regulators to regulate all the trading and exchanges and custodians in Canada, because that is our problem now. We run probably the third largest fund in the world at over $1 billion, and we can't use Canadian infrastructure. We cannot trade on Canadian exchanges because they're not regulated. We cannot keep it in Canadian custodians because they're not regulated. We can't use Canadian OTC trading desks. So for us to keep Canada as a leader in this space, they have to allow us to trade with Canadian counterparties and bring the infrastructure to Canada. So now Canada has the third largest client in the world, yet we can't use any of the rest of the Canadian infrastructure. So we're working very hard with our partners and the other players in the Canadian industry, most of who are members of the CBC, to try and use our power and our strength and our good knowledge to benefit the entire industry.
Well, if there's anyone that can do it, Fred, it would absolutely be you. You're definitely a pioneer in this space, and what you've already been able to do is absolutely incredible. I know it takes a long time to get adoption, and something new like Bitcoin is I think it's actually picking up adoption pretty quickly, but regulators in Canada are definitely slower than we would have liked to see. And I've seen things move a lot quicker. Even Switzerland has some great regulations around it. I know people are heading to Malta because of what they're doing. Even the States is moving forward quicker. I think the States just allowed banks to be able to do things with Bitcoin now, and Canada's just like, no. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense as to why yet. Either they just haven't been able to completely wrap their minds around it, or they don't have enough expertise on the inside. But I'm pretty sure you'll be able to hammer it home to them, help it move forward.
That's the idea.
Yeah, hopefully. So what are your plans for 3iQ's future direction? Are there any upcoming products that you're going to be adding to your fund?
Yeah, so there's so many exciting things happening. First and foremost, and I know the CBC has talked a lot about stable coins, and I think one of the big fallacies is I used to get really frustrated when people said, I'm not going to buy Bitcoin until I can use Bitcoin at Starbucks to buy my coffee. And I'm going, you're not going to use Bitcoin to buy your coffee at Starbucks. You're going to use a digital Canadian dollar, or you're going to use a digital US dollar to buy your coffee at Starbucks. Why would you? It's like going into Starbucks with a bar of gold and saying, "Hey, I'd like a coffee, please. Can you give me some change for this?"
Do you mind shaving off a little layer of that?
Yeah. So the reality is Bitcoin is not going to be used on a day-to-day basis, but you will have stable coins. You will have a digital Canadian dollar, digital US dollar, digital Japanese yen, digital euros. And we own a company in partnership with Maven Net Systems called Canada Stable Corp. We hope to launch. We launched the first digital Canadian dollar about a year ago exactly, called QCAD. And we're now, in the adoption phase of getting QCAD generally adopted in Canada, which will be wonderful. That's going to be great. But the other part is with this whole decentralized finance, what people call DeFi, we can create products like our Bitcoin fund, our Ethereum fund, and wrap them and hypothecate them and become income products. So we're looking to do an entire series of digital yield funds. So you can get, for example, your money market in Canadian dollars pays you 0.2%. We can create a digital Canadian dollar money market, so to speak, or a decentralized finance yield fund that would pay, let's say, 5%. And so people will be able to use the digital infrastructure and take out the middleman and get higher interest rates and yields.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I know there's definitely a lot of conversations. We were teaching a class on like what is Bitcoin yesterday, and somebody was in our group saying that this is like, well, it's not transactional based currency. Visa and MasterCard, like they can do, umpteen amounts of transactions per second. Bitcoin, you can't use as money. And like our comments were very similar to that. It's just like, well, if you look at this particular asset and you look at how it's been, increasing in value over a 10-year period, would you really want to go and spend, like that $6-7 in a coffee with it if it could be worth like $14, within a couple of weeks or the next year, right? So it's more of that time preference. But we already have, currency that actually works within this existing system. Bitcoin just gives you that time preference. It's that store of value. It's that asset that you would potentially back your digital currency against. And so with Stable Corp and your QCAD, is that kind of how you would see that, as like Bitcoin being your reserve currency and QCAD being what you would transact with?
Actually, our QCAD right now sits on the Ethereum blockchain. So
okay.
So
are you gonna be moving that over?
All my Bitcoiners, all my Bitcoin maximalist buddies are all rolling over in their grave going, no, please put it on Bitcoin blockchain. And a lot of those transactions questions, obviously with the Lightning Network, with there's so much going on in Bitcoin that, timing is not an issue anymore. It's a store of wealth issue, right? I've got more $5,000 t-shirts and $8,000 toques than most people. The funny one is, I remember I bought a cooking knife, for Google knows everything about you. So Google emails me and goes, "Hey, we know you're a cook and we know you own Bitcoin. So here we are, we've got this beautiful save steel Japanese cooking knife, which is, usually goes for about 300 US or 400 US for a cooking knife." And it goes, "Only one Bitcoin." I said, "Perfect, no problem." So I buy this knife, and in 48 hours, in comes this beautiful cooking knife for one Bitcoin. So I remember, I think with my son going, he goes, "You didn't spend $400 on that cooking knife, did you?" I said, no, just one Bitcoin. And he goes, "Oh, I don't get it." So last year at Christmas, when I'm carving up the turkey, he goes, "How's your $40,000 cooking knife, Dad?" So that's how you learn the store of wealth and appreciate the popularity. So yeah, don't spend your Bitcoin, just hodl it. And when somebody gives it to you, take it. I bought dinner for 7 Bitcoins in Italy also 10 years ago. So very expensive dinner now. So, but yeah, life, it all works out that way. And I think people have to look at whether Bitcoin works out or not, right? It should be a part of everybody's portfolio. Bitcoin is the most exciting technological advancement of our lifetime. And I explain it by talking about the history of the internet. You know, email is not worth zero. Live streaming is not worth zero. Voice over internet protocol is not worth zero. Text messaging is not worth zero. You know, and the Bitcoin blockchain is not worth zero. It's the most powerful, secure computer network in the world, and people will embrace it. And when they do, they're going to pay more than we can. Warren Buffett can afford to pay $1 million of Bitcoin. We can't.
No, got to get in early. I know when I started, so that's kind of strange. Like, so I'm like 37 now, and I remember being around 15, 16, hearing all about like, oh, the .com and the bubble, and how everyone was just like desperately buying up all these like, you know, pets.com, this.com, that.com. I just remember feeling like, wow, I missed the boat. Like, this is probably one of like the biggest things that's happened in our economy. And, you know, I wish I was older because I would have been able to like, you know, participate in it. And I felt really sad that I had like missed out on this incredible opportunity. Not so much the bubble, but what the internet, kind of like that internet craze did is it created mass adoption, but also credibility and legitimacy. If you look at the world today, it's like, yeah, you called it a bubble, but Amazon what, right? Microsoft what? Everyone is currently using it. And I see it similar to Bitcoin. So when I was little, my dad was huge into like teaching us all about money. The first book he ever gave me was Billions for the Bankers, Debts for the People. He's like, you need to understand how your monetary system works. So when I started hearing about Bitcoin, looking into it, I was like, oh my gosh, it's happening again in my lifetime. I'm so excited. I'm totally going to get in on this because I know how big this is going to be. And watching it today, I'm so thrilled. Like, I have my own kind of like funny little Bitcoin story. One of my business partners and I, we put on this tech conference, and Bitcoin had just like completely crashed. I think it made it down to like $3,000 US or something. And he had an expense he had to pay. And he's just like, how about I'll give you the Bitcoin, you give them the cash. I was like, sweet, okay, I'll take that. So I just like bought, and I held that Bitcoin. And then I think like a month ago, I went to him, I was like, yeah, remember when you like, I was like, I just made like this much money off paying your bill. And he's just like, jackass. So it's always worth so much more than you think it's going to be. But so I always love kind of like asking this question, but and I know everyone's kind of going in on price and crazy predictions. And to me, one Bitcoin is always going to be worth one Bitcoin. I couldn't imagine ever like not having and keeping my Bitcoin. But any kind of price predictions for where you think we could be at the end of 2021?
Yeah, all I can say is that, you know, it's proven that in every halving, Bitcoin goes up 10x. So first when it went from 1,000 to 10,000, so we're clearly going from 10,000 to 100,000 in the next 3 years or so. And then the next 4 years after that, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw it go from 100,000 to 1 million. And it all has to do with the math and the adoption. I think people will continue to use it. I think people will continue to invest in it. I think there's going to be many more people that are going to embrace it. And, you know, I have this T-shirt that says, it's not too late. And that was when Bitcoin crossed 10,000. Well, Bitcoin 30,000, I think Chris Berniski said it best. It's you're not too early, but it's not too late. So, you know, you're not part of the early crowd. Like, we are fortunate, very fortunate to be. But, you know, we are part of the everybody still has a chance to participate in a good movement of it. And as I said, decentralized finance is going to create all kinds of new opportunities. And to be blunt, I've been in the stock market for 40 years, and I'm very worried about the stock market. But a lot of people don't realize is what made Bitcoin run from 10 to 40 US instead of Canadian, or 15 to 50 Canadian. Was the head of the Federal Reserve saying we can print unlimited amounts of money with a straight face. Mm-hmm. And every wealthy person in the world, went, uh-oh, I don't want to own something that somebody can print unlimited amounts of. And Bitcoin immediately went from 10 to 40,000. So it's be wary about that. And when they stop the liquidity pool, the stock market will have a very serious correction, and people will need to hide somewhere. And I'm not sure Bitcoin will be the place to hide, but Bitcoin's unique. It's both a risk on and a risk off asset. So it's very cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I've definitely found the money printing fascinating. I remember speaking with someone from the Canadian government who is an economist, and I kind of asked him, I was like, well, how do you see like inflation rates, or how do you see, like the debasement of our dollar, over the next couple of years, based on the fact that 70% of our money in circulation has come out since COVID started. And I was like, we've just increased our money supply by like, 470 something billion dollars. And the gentleman actually like straight face looked at me and he was just like, no, we haven't increased our money in circulation. And I was just like, I'm sorry, what? I was like, so if the government just borrowed, like that many billions of dollars and they're loaning it out to people, and the people are taking on these loans and then go purchasing things with it, that literally enters that money into the supply. I was like, and he's just like, well, I meant it wasn't printed money. I was like, I didn't say anything about printed money. I literally said you guys increased our money by 70%. And it's out in circulation right now, which means you've debased our currency. And I was like, and you're continuing to do it. Like we have like $8.6 trillion in debt in Canada right now. I was like, I wouldn't actually feel safe financially if I didn't hold Bitcoin, but I'm definitely very, very, very bullish on it. I couldn't imagine holding fiat currency because it's not going to be worth a whole lot if they keep this up. But that's probably a whole other topic for a whole other day. I want to thank you so much, Fred, for being with us here today. Thank you so much for being a member with our consortium. I really encourage everyone, if you have not heard of Fred Pye, check him out. Go to his website, 3iq.ca. They're an absolutely incredible company. Fred is an incredible pioneer. We're definitely going to be having him back to do more podcasts in the future, webinars. If you'd like to learn more about Canada Blockchain, or Canadian Blockchain Consortium, sorry, go to canadablockchain.ca. We do podcasts every month. We do webinars. We do events. If you're looking to learn more about, Bitcoin or blockchain, anything like that, come check us out. We have recently just launched a magazine. So we're going to keep you up to date on all the latest trends, everything that's new and emerging. And we look forward to having you on our next show. So thank you so much, everyone. And thank you again, Fred.
Thank you, Kalea. And it's QBTC on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Don't forget that. Thank you.
Awesome.